Ooh, it's a top 10 list of your favorite G-Man, yeah. Godzilla films have a long history and are iconic to the monster movie genre, with Godzilla himself becoming a cultural symbol representing themes like nuclear weapons, environmental concerns, and the resilience of humanity. So, with the massive success of Godzilla Minus One and in anticipation for Godzilla Kong The New Empire, I wanted to go through and pick out my top 10 in the franchise. This was a tough list to make, I tend to like most Godzilla films, and you will probably disagree with some of my choices, so be sure to leave your top 10 down in the comments. And be sure to like and subscribe. Let's do this.
Godzilla!
Number 10. Godzilla vs. Hedorah. Hedorah, I don't know. Released in 1971, Godzilla vs. Hedorah always seemed to have this vibe that it was labeled a stinker in the franchise. It wasn't easily available on home release, and I don't remember it being on TV a lot growing up. So I didn't grow up with it. I just kind of heard that it was weird and, well, trippy. Finally seeing it as a young adult, and I don't know, man, I just like the vibe of this movie. You got classic Showa era vibes. And hey, I love Godzilla being a villain. I love him being a big old baddie. I mean, that's how the franchise started. But I do also love him being this version of the hero and a protector, and basically overall more marketed towards kids.
What is that? That's Godzilla!
Why not have a bunch of different flavors in our Godzilla stew? We got our Godzilla films that are more gloomy and heavy on the nuclear fallout metaphor, which are wonderful and why the franchise is very important. But I love these installments where you can have a little bit more fun. I mean, this one's got psychedelic music and imagery and is such a product of its time of the late 60s and early 70s. And Hedorah the Smog Monster, I do love the design, it's very cartoonish. I see why other people might not be into this movie, maybe it's not what you're looking for in a Godzilla film, but I don't know. To me, it feels like the ultimate after-school special with Godzilla and how we're gonna defeat pollution together. And I don't know, I'm just here for it. You can love it, you can hate it, just make sure you recycle it, huh? It's number 10. On to number 9. It's the finale of the Heisei era with Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. Making its mark on the franchise with a tear-jerking and often nostalgic finale to the then 40-year franchise. Connecting this chapter back to the beginning, this film depicts the aftermath of Dr. Serizawa using the oxygen destroyer to defeat the original Godzilla, which infected microorganisms in the earth which grew and grew throughout the decades since, which have now mutated into horrible land-crawling creatures. Plus, if that wasn't enough, a volcanic eruption exposes radiation, causing our main man Godzilla to take on way too much of it, threatening a world-ending meltdown.
First his heart, the reactor will melt down. Then his outer body will. There'll be nothing left.
This movie represents one of Godzilla's biggest challenges. Poor guy is just trying to save his son, Godzilla Jr., while his temperature reaches critically dangerous levels. Plus, when all of the alien-inspired crustacean creatures form into a giant monster named Destoroyah, we may have never seen the odds against Godzilla like they are in this film. Which creates more stakes, and you really care about what's going to happen to him, and it makes a more entertaining movie overall. The final scene of Godzilla melting is truly heartbreaking, done with beautiful imagery and effects and music, with high respect to the end of at least this era of a cinematic legend. And that's why it's number 9. Number 8. I can't tell you how many Saturday mornings I spent watching this movie. It's Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. Inspired by Mecha Kong from King Kong Escapes, Toho decided that the king of the monsters deserved his own mechanical twin foe. This movie has all the fun that the later Showa era is known for. You got multiple kaijus, including an evil mechanical version of the G-Man himself. People who are actually green Planet of the Apes looking aliens in disguise. Singing priestesses who are trying to wake a dog lion god from ancient slumber. This is a King Caesar stan account, by the way. It sounds like a mess, but it's actually a really fun Godzilla film filled to the brim with camp and pulp, while managing to still fit in darker elements like how the final fight became heavy on the blood and violence. With this being the 14th entry in the franchise, this movie proves that there's many more new and exciting stories to be had in the world of Godzilla, and taught us that if you ever see a robot version of you coming down the block, you rip that bastard's head off. Am I right, KC? And that's why it's number 8. Number 7. After a 10-year absence from the silver screen and 16 years since the last American iteration, which went great, right? Universally acclaimed.
That's a lot of fish.
Warner Brothers and Legendary Pictures took another shot at an American Godzilla film, and I think director Gareth Edwards played it smart. It may have been way too easy to make this another overblown action-packed kaiju film, not unlike the previous year's Pacific Rim, which I adore. Instead, for the launch of this franchise, Edwards takes the Jaws approach by not overshowing the monster. Most shots of the so-called Titans were filmed from the human's point of view, which makes the scale and danger of giant monsters attacking even more real and entertaining. That's the movie's strength and its weakness. Famously, there are 2 times in the film where kaiju action is about to pop off, and then the camera just cuts away. This has notoriously made audiences and fans upset, but I have a feeling that the director really loves that reaction and playing with expectations. But you gotta admit that all that waiting made the final fight all that more impressive and rewarding. As far as Godzilla films go, the human plot has never been that great or interesting, but I do find myself enjoying these characters, who maybe at worst are a little bit bland. I love Bryan Cranston in this film. I just wish he stuck around a little bit longer, you know? They killed him off right in the beginning, and maybe if they did it towards the end, it would have been a little bit more impactful. Besides that, I love this launch of the Monsterverse. There's so much love and tribute woven into this while still trying to do something new. From Godzilla's bold, new, but still familiar design, to the monster action we all love being filmed in new and exciting ways, setting a new bar of quality for the franchise and the genre at large. And to me is a beautiful and a successful reintroduction of an American Goji. On to number 6. I simply do not remember a time when Mothra vs. Godzilla, aka Godzilla vs. The Thing, wasn't in my life. If I was to introduce someone to this franchise, this would be the first movie I would show. It perfectly encapsulates what a Godzilla movie is. After her solo debut in 1961, Toho for the first time ever combined 2 of their monsters from separate films with Mothra and Godzilla, who this time around is playing a big old baddie fresh off his defeat in King Kong vs. Godzilla. A great antagonist to the Queen Mother herself, Mothra, and her vengeful larva babies. A pretty simple plot, but this movie perfectly encapsulates the magic of the Showa era. The small fairy-like twins of Infant Island, aka Shobijin, were always a particular favorite for me growing up.
Return the egg. Please return the egg.
Trying to reason with humanity, basically acting as a voice for Mothra, while Godzilla poses a destructive threat. Along with the typical army tanks, weapons, and tearing down buildings, this movie also has a sense of magic and mysticism. especially with the music and the beautiful Mothra song creating that atmosphere. Mothra would continue her queen icon status throughout the years and grow in popularity. Though they may have been adversaries here, Mothra and Godzilla would become friends in many other stories, many referring to them as king and queen of the monsters. It just feels correct. This is Toho on top of their game, and besides the original, I can't think of a movie that is more important in building and paving the way for this beloved franchise. And Mothra will always be my personal favorite monster, besides the G-Man. Number 5. The movie that helped revive the box office after a global pandemic, Godzilla vs. Kong. After successfully launching the MonsterVerse and building out the world, it was only a matter of time before these titans met again on the big screen, fighting it out to see who is truly king. MonsterVerse started off somewhat grounded in 2014's Godzilla, but by the time you got to the current series' 4th outing, they were ready to lean into the fun and quirkiness that this series was known for in the past. This may be a Godzilla countdown, but King Kong really owns the emotional arc of this film, as he discovers his origins and his place in a world of monsters. This movie really is a fun ride with awesome special effects and plenty of callbacks to the original King Kong vs. Godzilla. While again the human plot does leave something to be desired, I do love the inclusion of the character Gia. Somehow her signing and literally communicating with Kong doesn't feel cheesy, but actually enhances our emotional connection between us and this damn dirty ape. As a Godzilla fan, first and foremost, I do love that this movie makes it apparent that he is the stronger of the two kings. And of course, when they put aside their differences to defeat a common enemy in Mechagodzilla. If you told me as a kid that they would remake Godzilla vs. Kong with a modern budget and this much love for the characters, I never would have believed you. I'm just so thankful that the MonsterVerse exists in this resurgence of kaiju films, and I cannot wait for Godzilla and Kong: The New Empire. Number 4. This is my favorite in the Warner Brothers MonsterVerse. It's Godzilla King of the Monsters, whose previous outing showed the monster sparingly, but director Michael Dougherty was ready to give the people what they want: giant monster fights. Showcasing some of the most beloved kaijus in the Toho pantheon, this film was an action-packed, fan service-filled delight. Never have we seen Rodan, King Ghidorah, and Mothra look so good. These have to be some of the best monster fights in Godzilla film history, filled with gorgeous cinematography that is straight up biblical. The human story, again, is pretty messy and pretty far-fetched, but it's great to see them flesh out the idea of Monarch and the lore and origins of the Titans. I live just outside Boston, which just isn't a city you see often in these type of big action films, so to have the final battle start at Fenway Park and escalate to such entertaining heights, how could I not absolutely love this film? It reminds us of just how dangerous nature can be and how it must be respected. Bow down to the king. We're in the top 3. It's the beginning of the 4th era of Godzilla films, the devastating Shin Godzilla. Toho's last installment was the flashy and celebratory Godzilla Final Wars in 2004. An accident occurs in Tokyo Bay as an emergency cabinet is assembled. We watch them fail time and time again as they try to contain and defeat a constantly evolving Godzilla, like we've never seen him before. This has to be the most horrifying depiction of the G-Man yet, stomping around in what seems like pain, anguish, and confusion as to what is happening to him. The practical effects mixed with the CGI are both gross and beautiful to look at. I love those googly eyes and all the sound effects that are from the original 54 film. The movie also highlights the horror of a government failing to make tough decisions in time to save the innocent lives of the public. Metaphorical to all too many real-life situations, but this taking direct inspiration from the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster, as well as the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. Shin Godzilla's atomic breath has never been this frightening to witness, spouting not only from his mouth but also his tail and dorsal plates, totally annihilating everything in its wake. This film reminds us that the relationship between us and Mother Nature is a fragile one. Are we collectively prepared to deal with whatever she throws at us next? The Japanese army just barely are able to defeat the radioactive god, though the final haunting image teases the war has only just begun. Number 2. You ever get the feeling that we are living in a Godzilla renaissance? The second film in the Reiwa era, Godzilla Minus One, has become a cultural touchstone, transcending the medium, bringing in new fans and reminding the old just how damn good a Goji film can be. As the people of Japan struggle to recover from the aftermath of World War II, a giant radioactive creature emerges to cause further trauma and destruction. While the MonsterVerse has delved into crazy science fiction fun, Toho continues to create deeply moving and thought-provoking Godzilla stories. I don't think I've ever been this invested in the human story in one of these movies. I mean, when I was younger, all I wanted was big monster fights, so sometimes I'd even just skip over the dialogue. But here, I couldn't imagine skipping over the oftentimes touching story of Koichi, Noriko, and Akiko, who create their own kind of chosen family during these unbelievable events. In an era of cinema where the American movie studios are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on box office bombs nobody really wanted, brilliant director Takashi Yamazaki and a small team of just 35 artists show you can still make a stunning movie with great action and visual effects at less than a quarter of the budget studios are currently spending. This kind of innovation has become a great example for the filmmaking business at large. Yes, you can save money and have an even better film when story is king. I feel like lifelong Godzilla fans have always known the potential a Godzilla story can have, even past the great action and monster fights.
Next, the nominees for achievement in visual effects. Godzilla Minus One.
The G-Man and the makers of Godzilla Minus One would go on to shock and delight audiences everywhere.
And the Oscar goes to Godzilla.
Becoming the first ever Godzilla film to win an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. I don't think I'm alone when I'm wishing that director Takashi Yamazaki continues on with this franchise, and I thank him for putting respect back on Godzilla's name. Finally, we're at number 1. So much has already been said and written about the original Godzilla.
And it's Gojira, you moron!
Oh, come on, you knew that was going to be number 1. Where could I even start? This is the first Godzilla movie I ever saw. Well, okay, actually it was the 1956 American cut with Raymond Burr, Godzilla King of the Monsters. My papa was also a movie buff, and he recorded a Godzilla marathon on TNT's Monster Vision.
It's more frightening than I ever thought possible.
One night, 5 movies. Find out who we call King of the Monsters. Monster Vision's Godzilla Bash 94. Next on TNT.
That special cable TV event would make me a Goji fan for life. So I have sort of a soft spot for the American version, but I do try to watch the original Japanese masterpiece when I rewatch it now. Especially because the ever-important and enriching themes of nuclear holocaust and the threat it is to all of us is a lot more apparent in that original cut. Yes, this can still be a fun 1950s monster romp like many of the films in the genre at the time, but with the constant nuclear double meaning and metaphor looming in every scene, the dread and emotion is palpable, even when watching as a kid and I had no idea of these histories. It's amazing how so many of the most famous elements of a Godzilla film were already here in the very first entry, including some of the most famous needle drops in film history by composer Akira Ifukube. This gargantuan classic spawned so much, not only in sequels, but becoming just as big as pop culture itself. I mean, no matter what the context is, when a giant anything is attacking a city, Godzilla is the first thing that comes to everyone's mind, whether you've seen this film or its 30+ sequels.
Well, there's something you don't see every day.
The character of Dr. Ashiro Serizawa was always my favorite, even more so when I truly started to understand just why he seemed so sad and conflicted.
俺が死なない限り、どんなことで再び使用する立場に追い込まれないと誰が断言できる。ああ、こんなものさえ作らなきゃ。
A character similar to J. Robert Oppenheimer, inventor of the atomic bomb. It's so beautifully tragic watching Serizawa fulfill his destiny of bringing the oxygen destroyer to life and taking it out.
幸福に暮らせよ。さよなら。さよなら。
So much more than destruction and mayhem, though we got plenty of that here, folks. Gojira carries a crucial deeper meaning and heart, a tribute to all those in Japan and abroad affected by real-life nuclear war, while also fulfilling childhood dreams of adventure and science fiction fantasies. This movie and what it represents to Japan and the world is the #1 reason why I'm proud to call myself a Godzilla fan.
I can hardly believe what has just happened.
Okay, before we go, I have to do an honorable mention for Godzilla 1998. Listen, I know, but it's one of the movies that got me into this franchise. Even though, yes, it should have been called Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
Nico Topopoulos.
It's the Topolis.